If you've seen any of our recent videos, you've seen that me and some of my friends have gotten together and we've been working through the show The Chosen, which is the first ever multi-season show covering the life of Jesus Christ. And we've been basically taking every episode of that show, breaking it down scene by scene by scene, and just talking about the historical, theological, cultural, biblical implications and inaccuracies of the whole show. And we've been doing very in-depth discussions on those that are basically over an hour long each episode, sometimes almost 2 hours long. And most recently, during episode 4, I had my friend Jonathan Payne on, and we did our in-depth discussion on that, but that was the first episode he had ever seen of The Chosen. And so what he's decided to do is he's decided to go back to episode 1, and he's going through each episode, and he's going to give us a much shorter and much more concise recap and review of each episode, so that if you don't have time to go through these very long and in-depth videos, you can go through these. So what you're about to see is the first episode of Down to Earth with JP. JP stands for Jonathan Payne. And so basically, he's just going to be giving his recaps of each episode of The Chosen, and hopefully they will bless you. So without further ado, here is your first episode of Down to Earth with JP.
Hey everybody, it's Jonathan. You probably know me from some of other David's videos. We've reviewed and talked about TV shows and movies and books. So the last video we did together was The Chosen, episode 4. So that had been the first episode of The Chosen I'd seen. I had kind of known about the show before and seen a few clips from it, but that was kind of my first introduction to a full episode, and I really liked it. It's a great show, and I could tell that the quality was good. They spent time with the accuracy and the story of it, making sure it lined up with scripture, and it's just a great experience, and I enjoyed reviewing it with David. So we had the idea that I would, since I'm going to watch the show, I'll just kind of review each episode as I go through, kind of giving my thoughts about it. Nothing too in-depth, just kind of reviewing what I think of it and how I think it relates to scripture or my life, or just whatever thoughts I have. So, yeah, the first episode is called I've Called You by Name, which plays into the ending of the show. So, obviously, the name of the episode plays into the episode somehow. So, yeah, one thing I really love about the show is it's isn't a direct transcript of the Bible. We don't see exactly what we read in the Bible, which I think is really cool. I don't think that would be bad or not entertaining. I think that would be awesome to see the scripture on screen. But they go a step even further, and they add some narrative and some personality to the characters, which is really cool to see. Because you can read the Bible, and you can kind of see what the author of each book of the Bible's perspective of a person was, and kind of gain a little knowledge about their personality, or just from the description of them. But I think it's a lot different. It can still be interpreted a little bit differently how you consider it. And obviously, as that translates into the show, they have their interpretation of that. But I think from what I've seen, that their personalities do line up with Scripture. They don't detract from what we read in the Gospels, but just add to it. So I think that's really important, is that we don't take anything away from the gospel and the story of the Bible, but if we add on to it to explain how characters got to where they were in the Bible, then that's fine. I think that's really cool to see that, because that's what this show is. A lot of it's the story of how did these characters that we see in the Bible end up at the point where they met Jesus and followed Jesus and were there at the cross with Jesus. So I think that's really cool to see and makes it entertaining to watch, even if you do know the stories of the Bible. So the the episode starts with a young girl and her dad, and the dad's comforting her. And another cool thing I like about the show is that we don't always get context for who we're seeing, so which is cool because if you do know the Bible, you're familiar with the characters and their names. And so this gives a little bit of mystery as to who is this character that I'm seeing in this episode. So when I watched episode 4, it started out with Simon, which by that point you will know who Simon is. But when I watched it, I had no idea. So it's kind of cool that it starts that way. This one is starting even before the Bible. So even if you are familiar with the stories of the Bible, you won't necessarily recognize this. You can kind of put the pieces together and figure it out. But when it cuts from this girl and her father, it cuts to the girl grown up, as we would suppose, and we figure out she's tormented by demons, and so we don't know who this character is until later because she actually doesn't go by her real name. So the name we get in here in this episode for her is something different than her real name. So I knew who she was because David had told me. We had talked about this, but I just really liked it. I like that mystery of that, and then it folding into the story and then being revealed in a cool way in the end of it. So other than this main character, who is Mary Magdalene, we'll find that out in the end, we see Simon. So Simon Peter, who is one of the disciples, is kind of, I guess, the main character that we follow along. Although it does jump views, so but I think it does focus on Simon a lot, and Simon's wife Eden, and then his brother Andrew, who they have kind of clashing thoughts and brotherly arguments and stuff like that. So it's kind of cool to see their relationship in terms of brothers, and it feels very realistic to how we see brothers react and argue with each other. So we also see Matthew, the tax collector. Matthew's a really cool character because he's kind of just like socially awkward guy. He's a tax collector, so he's not looked down on by the Jews, even though he is a Jew, and he works with the Romans, who look down on Jews in general. So he's kind of just rejected by both of these groups, and he already has like this social awkwardness. So people don't like him already because of his career choice, and then he also doesn't have like the charisma or personality to get anyone to like him anyway. So you kind of feel bad for him, and you just like there with his awkwardness, realizing like, what does this guy do? So it's gonna be really cool to see this character develop and how he's gonna meet Jesus and become the author and apostle Matthew that we know in the Bible. Another character we see is Nicodemus, which is really cool. Also, we do see Nicodemus a couple times in the Bible, but this one starts even before Jesus. So it's kind of cool to see how Nicodemus got to the point that we see him in the Bible. Like, we obviously know he went to Jesus to talk to him about salvation. But what got Nicodemus to that point? What made him interested? What made him different than all the other Pharisees who didn't go ask Jesus all the questions Nicodemus did? So it's cool to see what led Nicodemus to that point. I look forward to seeing that journey to that point. In this episode, we see him asked by the Romans to go and cast out the 7 demons that Mary has. And obviously he fails. And from this, he realizes that, he's not powerful enough or faithful enough to do it. He says himself, like, only God could do this. Only God is powerful enough to cast these demons out. So I think he's really struggling there because he's realizing he may not be as high and mighty as the Pharisees make themselves out to be, not as holy as they appear to be. And I think this is kind of the setting up the idea in Nicodemus's head that, hey, I am not as great as I appear to be. Like, maybe there's more to this. And obviously John the Baptist, this is kind of when he's around and giving his message, and he's going to learn about him, and he's going to start thinking. And we see that process, and that's just a cool kind of backstory to Nicodemus that we don't get from the Bible. So yeah, we get all these characters. This episode wasn't like my number one favorite. I've only watched 2 though, so episode 4 was really good. This one was also good, and I think it's a pretty pretty well done first episode that introduces characters. And I think the ending was very powerful and really great. We see that Mary's kind of given up hope, and she's leaving this this tavern or bar or whatever, and she runs into Jesus, and she doesn't know it's Jesus, but he casts out the demons, and he calls her by her real name, which she hasn't been called by the entire episode, but he calls her Mary Magdalene. And she realizes, hey, this man is more than just a Pharisee or a holy man. There's something special about him. And we don't get to see much more of that, but just from that, we know, Mary had, thought about suicide earlier. We know how this has impacted him doing this. So we hear about the fact that Jesus cast out the demons from Mary Magdalene in the Bible, but we don't really get the story of how or when or any of that when it happened. So this isn't detracting from what happened in the Bible, but it's a cool story that shows the impact of Jesus on people's lives. So it was really cool to see that. So solid entry to the show, introducing us to who kind of the main viewpoints of the show that we're going to see. So yeah, I definitely recommend watching. I think this is a great show if you have never read the Bible, if you're not a Christian, or you just don't know much about the Bible and you are a Christian. This is a great show to watch because it does have the stories of the Bible, and I think it would get you interested in reading the Bible. I hope it does. And I think that if you do know the stories of the Bible and you have studied them your whole life or heard them your entire life, this show is still interesting and fun to watch because it adds narrative and personality to the characters that we don't necessarily get when we read through it. And maybe it will show you something through the scriptures and through the Gospels that you had never realized before. And I think I see that a lot when I see some of the characters, like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, that's how that character is. I never attributed them to that, but that lines up with the actions that they take and the way that they perceive things and the way that they question things. Sometimes we look at the characters in the Bible and we're like, why would they ask that? That doesn't seem right. But when you have some kind of context behind who they are and what they're going through, it makes a lot of sense why they would do or say the things that they do. So, yeah, solid entry to the show with the pilot episode. So yeah, I definitely recommend watching the show, whether you're a Christian or not. If you aren't a Christian and you just want to watch a good show, I would still recommend it because it's a good quality show. Most of the actors are really good. I don't know all of them. I don't. They're not like really A-list actors necessarily. Nicodemus is a really well-known actor, but I think they do a really good job for a show that was crowdfunded, which the entire show was just completely crowdfunded. And I think that that's amazing, that what they've done with what they have, and I hope they continue to do a good job. Everything seems to follow well with the scriptures. There's no deviation. There's just some added story that's not in the Bible, but everything seems to be historically checked, and they have experts that go through the Bible and make sure that it all lines up appropriately. We don't get all the stories from the Bible in the show, but I think that that's fine because the stuff that we do get is really great. So yeah, definitely recommend watching the show. I will continue to do these for each episode. So hopefully you got something out of it. If anything, just got you interested in watching the show. If that's your takeaway, that's great. And I will continue to give my insight on these and watch through them. I really look forward to it. They're a lot of fun. So have an awesome day, and God bless.
Oh.